Snakes. Why'd it have to be snakes? Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just a thrilling adventure film. It was a battlefield of chaos, danger, and last-minute miracles. Behind the fedora and whip was a production plagued by food poisoning, brutal accidents, studio interference, and sheer madness on set. From Harrison Ford's real injuries to Steven Spielberg's battles with the studio, the making of this film was every bit as daring as Indy's quest for the Ark. Today we're pulling back the curtain on 20 weird facts about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and trust me, some of these secrets are stranger than fiction, and wait until you hear the bonus fact. A shocking truth buried deep in Hollywood lore, so grab your whip, watch your step for snakes, and let's dive in. The famous snake scene was pure chaos. Everyone remembers Indiana Jones dropping into a pit swarming with snakes, but the reality behind the camera? Absolute mayhem. Spielberg requested 2,000 snakes, but the wranglers showed up with fewer than 500. The floor looked embarrassingly bare. So production scrambled, importing over 7,000 snakes from across Europe. Many were non-venomous, but some deadly cobras slipped into the mix. At one point, a cobra raised its hood just inches from Harrison Ford's face. Only a sheet of glass separated them. The heat lamps on set made the reptiles even more restless. Crew members reportedly quit on the spot, terrified by the sheer scale of the writhing mass. What audiences saw as a thrilling scene was, in reality, a dangerous gamble with thousands of unpredictable creatures. Not staged chaos, real chaos. Harrison Ford's real injuries changed the script. Indiana Jones looks rugged on screen because Harrison Ford wasn't acting. He was genuinely battered. While filming in Tunisia, Ford tore a ligament in his knee after being thrown from a runaway truck stunt. Instead of halting production, Ford insisted on pushing through the pain. The crew adapted, filming many chase sequences with a stunt double. But Ford still performed the infamous truck-dragging stunt himself, clinging to the bumper as the vehicle barreled forward. His raw exhaustion and grimaces were real, not rehearsed. Spielberg later admitted that Ford's injuries added authenticity to Indy's beaten-down look. Raiders wasn't polished perfection, it was survival filmmaking. Not Hollywood gloss, but bruises turned into box office gold. The iconic boulder almost crushed Indiana Jones. For real. That heart-pounding opening sequence where Indy flees a giant rolling boulder nearly ended in disaster. The boulder wasn't lightweight foam. It was a massive 22-foot fiberglass prop weighing hundreds of pounds. Ford insisted on performing the stunt himself, sprinting through the collapsing temple as the massive sphere barreled behind him. Spielberg shot the scene multiple times, and each take brought Ford within mere feet of being crushed. He later admitted that a mistimed step could have killed him instantly. The danger wasn't movie magic. It was one man running for his life, with the camera rolling. What looks like a perfectly choreographed sequence was, in truth, a real brush with death. Raiders wasn't pretending to be dangerous. It was. The infamous food poisoning epidemic. Shooting in Tunisia wasn't just hot, it was hazardous. Nearly the entire cast and crew came down with brutal food poisoning. The water was unsafe, and the local cuisine didn't sit well with American stomachs. Spielberg, however, avoided the illness by eating nothing but canned SpaghettiOs he brought from home. Ford wasn't so lucky. At one point, after being violently ill, he faced a grueling sword fight scene with a stuntman. Too weak to swing his whip, Ford suggested shooting the man instead. Spielberg agreed, and the result was one of the film's funniest and most beloved moments. What fans thought was scripted brilliance was actually Ford improvising around his illness. A disaster became comedy gold, and one of the most quoted scenes in cinema history. The exploding plane scene was almost fatal. The desert fight where Indy battles a burly German mechanic near a spinning airplane propeller was even deadlier behind the scenes. The aircraft used in the scene had real, functional propellers, and one wrong move could have spelled catastrophe. During the fight, Ford slipped and was dragged dangerously close to the blades. He escaped with only minor bruises, but it was a chilling reminder that Raiders was pushing the limits of safety. The scene ended with the mechanic's gruesome on-screen death, staged with clever effects. But in reality, Ford himself narrowly avoided becoming another casualty of the shoot. Raiders wasn't just action-packed, it was life-threatening filmmaking on the edge. Karen Allen's near-burning accident. Marion Ravenwood's fiery spirit almost ended in a literal blaze. During the bar fight sequence in Nepal, the set was rigged with flames, shattered bottles, and collapsing beams. At one point, Karen Allen's dress caught fire from a torch, and panic erupted. A quick-thinking stuntman ripped the flames from her costume before disaster struck. Allen later admitted she was shaken, but Spielberg insisted on using real fire for intensity. Unlike today's CGI safety nets, Raiders thrived on practical effects, sometimes too practical. The danger Allen faced wasn't an illusion. It was a terrifying brush with real disaster. The scene captures chaos on screen, but few fans realize the actress narrowly avoided a catastrophic accident. Raiders wasn't polished perfection, it was grit, danger, and real flames licking at its stars. The truck chase stunt was a painful ordeal. The truck chase remains one of cinema's greatest action sequences, but it came at a painful cost. Stuntman Terry Leonard performed the jaw-dropping drag under the moving truck, being pulled behind it before climbing back on. That stunt had only been attempted once before in a 1930s Western, and Leonard wanted to outdo it. But disaster struck when the truck's wheels bounced over rough terrain, dragging him dangerously close to the rear tires. Harrison Ford, still recovering from his knee injury, stepped in for additional shots, enduring brutal scrapes himself. Spielberg later said the stunt was the closest I've ever come to killing somebody on a film set. What looks like thrilling choreography was a dangerous gamble where one slip could have meant death. Raiders didn't fake risk. It filmed it. The Ark's melting faces nearly broke ratings rules. The climactic scene where Nazis melt and explode in supernatural fury shocked audiences, but it almost didn't make it past the ratings board. The effect was achieved with wax figures of the actors, melted with heat lamps over hours, and filmed in time-lapse. The result was so grotesque that Spielberg had to add fire overlays to soften the gore. Even then, the MPAA debated giving Raiders an R rating. Spielberg fought hard, arguing it was fantasy horror, not gore. He won, but only barely. Audiences gasped in shock, unaware that the scene teetered on the edge of censorship. Not just scary, controversial. Raiders blurred the line between adventure fun and nightmare fuel, and the melting faces became some of the most iconic and disturbing shots in cinema history. Spielberg's secret deal with George Lucas. Behind Raiders' success was a secret pact between two Hollywood giants. After the stressful production of Jaws and Close Encounters, Spielberg craved the chance to direct a James Bond movie, but Lucas had another idea. He pitched Indy as better than Bond, promising Spielberg a swashbuckling hero without the baggage of the spy franchise. The catch? Lucas also convinced Spielberg to work on a 3-film deal from the start. Raiders wasn't intended as a standalone, it was always the first chapter of a saga. This backroom handshake shaped the future of cinema, creating not just one adventure, but an empire. Spielberg didn't get Bond. Instead, he got Indy, and history proved Lucas right. Raiders wasn't just a movie, it was the foundation of a dynasty, the sword fight that never was. We touched on it earlier, but the story deserves its own spotlight. The elaborate Cairo street fight between Indy and a sword-wielding assassin was supposed to be a 3-day stunt sequence, with Ford cracking his whip through dazzling choreography. But illness changed everything. Struck down by food poisoning, Ford begged Spielberg to let him end the fight with one quick gunshot. The crew laughed, Spielberg agreed, and movie history was made. That one unscripted gag became one of the most iconic moments in cinema. It proved that improvisation, born out of desperation, could outshine months of planning. What should have been just another fight scene turned into a masterclass in timing, humor, and character. Raiders didn't just survive production chaos, it thrived on it. Spielberg's 12-week shoot promise. Studios feared Raiders would spiral into another over-budget disaster like Apocalypse Now. So Steven Spielberg made a bold promise. He'd finish the entire shoot in just 12 weeks. For context, most blockbusters of the era took 20 to 30 weeks. Spielberg stuck to it by shooting fast, cutting indulgent angles, and skipping rehearsals. The crew said he often filmed in TV style, capturing just what he needed and moving on. This efficiency saved millions and kept Paramount happy. But it also meant actors had to nail takes under brutal pressure. Karen Allen recalled Spielberg whispering, "We don't have time for perfection, just truth." Raiders wasn't polished with luxury. It was forged under a ticking clock where speed and instinct made the difference between a masterpiece and a studio shutdown. The monkey's Nazi salute took weeks. One of the strangest challenges came from an unlikely star, the little monkey in Cairo. Spielberg wanted it to give a Nazi salute on command. Sounds simple? It wasn't. The monkey refused to cooperate even after weeks of coaxing. Finally, the crew resorted to holding a grape above the camera. As the monkey reached, it appeared to salute. The illusion worked so well that audiences believed it was intentional. Spielberg later laughed, admitting it was one of the hardest shots of the entire film. What seems like a quick sight gag on screen was, behind the scenes, an exhausting ordeal of animal wrangling, patience, and food bribes. Raiders wasn't just about managing stars like Ford and Allen. It was about convincing a stubborn monkey to become a Nazi sympathizer for one unforgettable moment. A real cobra nearly killed a crew member. The snake pit wasn't just scary for actors, it was deadly for the crew. While setting up a shot, a wrangler was bitten by a cobra that had slipped through safety checks. He survived only because the snake's venom glands had been removed beforehand, a precaution Spielberg demanded. But not all snakes were devenomed, and Ford himself stood face to face with a spitting cobra. Only a thin pane of glass separated him from lethal venom. In the finished film, you can actually see the cobra flaring its hood right in front of Ford's terrified expression. No CGI, no safety net, just real danger filmed in the raw. Raiders blurred the line between fiction and nightmare, turning animal handling into one of the riskiest gambles of the shoot. The flying wing explosion was too real. The desert airplane fight ends with a spectacular fireball as the fuel tank ignites. But that explosion was far bigger than planned. Spielberg ordered a massive pyrotechnic rig, but the desert winds shifted at the last moment. The resulting blast shattered windows a quarter-mile away and knocked crew members off their feet. Karen Allen recalled feeling her skin burn from the heat wave, even though she was at a safe distance. Spielberg loved the chaos and kept the shot, but Paramount executives later complained it was reckless. Raiders thrived on practical effects, but the crew often had no idea just how destructive those effects would be until after cameras rolled. Not movie magic, but uncontrolled fury captured on film. Ford performed the whip tricks himself. Indiana Jones's whip wasn't just a prop, it was an extension of the character. And unlike many action stars, Harrison Ford insisted on performing the whip stunts himself. He trained with stunt coordinator Glenn Randall for weeks until he could snatch guns from extras' hands and coil the whip with precision. Ford's dedication impressed the crew, but it wasn't without cost. The whip regularly snapped back, leaving his chin and arms covered in welts. Ford even joked that the whip was his most dangerous co-star. Those fluid whip cracks that audiences loved, they weren't sound effects, they were Ford's own handiwork, often filmed live on set. Raiders wasn't faking Indy's skill. It was Harrison Ford sweating and bleeding, mastering a weapon that became cinematic legend. The ghostly spirits were DIY effects. The eerie finale, when ghostly apparitions erupt from the Ark, looks surprisingly convincing even today. But the secret wasn't high tech, it was a fish tank in Spielberg's garage. The effects team suspended miniature models in water, backlit them, and filmed the slow movements to create the ethereal, floating look. Later, they layered the footage with optical effects, stretching and distorting the shapes to give them a supernatural edge. The result blended dreamlike beauty with sudden horror as the spirits transformed into shrieking monsters. Spielberg admitted the low-budget trick was a gamble, but it worked so well it stunned audiences. Raiders didn't rely on futuristic tech, it relied on ingenuity, turning a home aquarium into one of cinema's most terrifying visual set pieces. Not expensive wizardry, but creative desperation at its finest. John Williams' score was almost rejected. The triumphant Indiana Jones theme is now one of the most recognizable in movie history, but it nearly didn't happen. When John Williams presented Spielberg with two possible themes, the director couldn't decide. One was bold and march-like, the other lyrical and soaring. Spielberg's solution? Why not use both? Williams merged them into a single composition, birthing the Raiders' March. But here's the kicker. Paramount executives initially thought it was too old-fashioned and urged Spielberg to consider something more contemporary. Spielberg fought back, insisting Williams' score gave Indy timeless grandeur. He won the battle, and the theme became immortal. What the studio saw as outdated became one of cinema's greatest musical signatures. Raiders wasn't just scored, it was crowned with sound that echoed. Through generations, Tunisia doubled as Egypt, for cheap. Audiences believed Indy was racing through Cairo's bustling streets, but the truth was far less glamorous. The production filmed in Tunisia, reusing many of the same locations from Star Wars. A New Hope. Why? Money. Shooting in actual Egypt was too costly and risky. Tunisia offered cheap labor, pliable government officials, and exotic backdrops. But the location also brought misery, sweltering heat, relentless dust, and the infamous food poisoning epidemic. Cast and crew dubbed it the Raiders' Diet, as nearly everyone lost weight from sickness. Spielberg later confessed he hated the shoot so much he dreamed of wrapping early and retreating to a hotel with his SpaghettiOs stash. The Cairo streets may have looked alive on screen, but off-camera, they were misery cloaked in desert sun. A Nazi extra got seriously hurt. In the climactic truck chase, hundreds of extras played German soldiers clinging to vehicles falling and rolling through the dirt. Most of these stunts were carefully rehearsed, but accidents still happened. One extra, playing a Nazi guard, mistimed his fall and was run over by a moving truck tire. Miraculously, the sandy terrain cushioned the impact and he survived with broken ribs but no permanent damage. Spielberg was shaken, halting production until safety protocols were reviewed. The accident underscored the razor-thin line between spectacle and tragedy on Raiders. Audiences thrilled at the chaos, never realizing one background actor nearly paid the ultimate price for realism. Raiders wasn't just dangerous for stars, it was perilous for the nameless soldiers filling its world. Paramount wanted a different Indy. Here's a twist. Harrison Ford wasn't the studio's first choice. Paramount executives pushed hard for Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones. Selleck even filmed a screen test in full costume, whip and all. But his commitment to Magnum PY made scheduling impossible. Lucas and Spielberg reluctantly moved to Ford despite Lucas's hesitation about reusing his Han Solo star. Fate intervened. Magnum's production delays might have freed Selleck in time, but Ford had already been cast. History was sealed. The rugged charm, the weary humor, the iconic smirk. None of it would have existed without Ford's interpretation. Raiders wasn't just about finding an actor. It was about finding the only man who could embody Indy. And it almost didn't happen. The Ark prop vanished. The Ark of the Covenant, the glittering centerpiece of the film, was itself lost to history. After production wrapped, the elaborate golden prop was stored at Elstree Studios in England. But when Spielberg returned years later to retrieve it, the Ark was gone. No records, no receipts, no explanation. Some say it was stolen, others believe it was quietly destroyed in storage. To this day, its fate remains a mystery. Fitting, isn't it? Just like the film's ending, where the Ark is locked away in a government warehouse, the real prop vanished into obscurity. Raiders blurred fiction and reality one last time, leaving behind a relic as mysterious as the treasure Indy risked his life to find. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just a movie, it was a battlefield of accidents, improvisations, and miraculous escapes. What audiences saw was thrilling perfection. What happened behind the camera was survival, chaos, and artistry colliding. From Ford's injuries to the Lost Ark itself, the making of Raiders was as daring as Indy's journey. If these secrets blew your mind, hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories, and remember, adventure always starts when you least expect it.